Hi, everyone. We are back again with season 2 of the Black Lawyers Podcast. I have Reverend CeCe Jones-Davis with me. I have the honor of interviewing her. I'm so excited. If you don't know who she is, you're going to know who she is by the end of this podcast. She is one of the main people with the campaign with Justice for Julius Jones, who his life was saved just a month or so ago. So we're still reeling from that. So we're excited to have her on the podcast to talk more about Julius, but we're actually going to learn a little bit more about CeCe today. How did CeCe become CeCe? I know a lot of you guys in the audience, some of you guys are lawyers and law students, but some of you guys are just advocates and you want to know, how can you get involved? What's the first step? So Reverend CeCe is going to tell us all about that. All right, so we're going to get started, Reverend CeCe. I always do this with all my guests. We do hot topics, right? And so today we're going to focus on some criminal justice reform hot topics in terms of things that have kind of happened in the last couple of weeks. So first, we'll start off with a very familiar story. As you know, one of my clients is Ahmaud Arbery. I do the intellectual property for his estate. And so on the criminal side, the audience, and you may be aware that, they were all found guilty and they all got life sentences, except for the person that was filming. So they all got life sentences, but the one that was filming got life with the possibility of parole. Right. Yeah, so the father and son did not get the possibility of parole. And so they were already thinking about, obviously, appealing their convictions anyway, even if their sentencing wasn't this. But I think they also even tried to offer, to serve, maybe just combine all the sentences, federal and state, since they also have federal charges, and serve it completely and federal so that they could still get out in this lifetime. And of course, Ahmaud's mom and they all said no. They, prosecution, they're like, no, we're not going to accept that deal. That's hitting them off easy. So what are your thoughts about, a lot of times, sometimes we're sitting on the edge of our seats for these verdicts. What do you think about like the verdict, the sentencing, and the possibility of an appeal?
Yeah, well, first, Jay Carter, thank you so much for having me. This is such an amazing opportunity. I'm so glad to talk to you. I'll be honest with you. Of course, we all know about Ahmaud and how tragic that his circumstances were. I have personally kind of unplugged from the news since November, just because of the work that I have been doing was so traumatic that I just didn't need another thing. But of course, I have heard about, Ahmaud and the trial and the verdict. And listen, I think it's all around sad for me. I don't glory in anyone spending the rest of their lives in prison, guilty, innocent, whatever. But was it a just conviction? Absolutely. Was it, did they make the right decision about what should happen to these folks who were responsible for this young man's death? Absolutely. And so, I am hoping that this really, is able to give Ahmaud's mother and his family and his loved ones, a sense of peace. I don't believe that we will live in this world and see complete justice. I don't believe that's how this world is set up. I think that we can get justice adjacent. I think we can get as close to justice as possible. And I think that that's what's happened in this situation. In terms of an appeal, no. I think that the sentencing was right. I think that it was fair. And, as sad as it makes me that other human beings will be, locked away for the rest of their lives and their family members will feel the impact of that and know the impact of that, that does not negate the fact that this was a just conviction and I think a fair sentencing. And it's relieving to see white people held accountable for for the deaths that they cause Black people. I don't gloat in it, but it is relieving for me to know that our cry and our prayers for so long are finally being responded to, that our lives do matter. Mm-hmm. They do matter.
It's funny that you say that, because and I don't want to misspeak. I know it's a family member of Emmett Till, who I think was working kind of along the side of George Floyd's brother at one point with some things, said the same thing. Every time their family hears a verdict, every time Emmett Till's family hears a verdict, it's like, it's a win for Emmett Till, because Emmett never got a win. He never got justice. Even the woman who even claimed, I think she passed away, but before she passed away, she admitted that she had lied. Yeah. It's like, you can't exonerate him. Like, what is it gonna take? I mean, the man, he was a teenage boy. Let's start off with that was murdered and killed. So I hear you on the front of, while you're not gloating in it, there is this sense of like, you can excel a little bit, because for so long, so many of our Black people, but specifically Black men, have been killed, and no one's been held accountable.
100%, 100%. And, it's time, I always think about these things generally and broadly speaking as, the earth coughing up is wrong. When we do see moments where, the right thing happens and the people are held accountable for the lives that they destroy, for destroying someone's life, it is as if the earth is coughing up its wrong, because we didn't get it right with Emmett Till, and we haven't gotten it right with so many Black and brown people, historically, who've been lynched and, falsely imprisoned and executed wrongfully, and all of these kinds of things. It is, it is a relief to feel like, okay, in some way, we are starting to get some things right.
For sure. And I agree. I mean, at the end of the day, in this country, I don't have to tell you, because you're going through this with Julius Jones, in terms of people have the right to appeal and things like that. I just think that on video, like, we've already watched it. Emmett wasn't on video, Julius wasn't on video, so we don't really have any corroborating thing where we could say, absolutely, these are the facts. And so, there's so much of this case that on the surface, they literally had the proverbial smoking gun in terms of what they had done to Ahmaud. So,
right.
Part of me is like, why are you wasting like taxpayer dollars, and resources to do an appeal when you kind of already know what the end result is? So obviously the Black Lawyers Podcast will continue to follow if they will actually do the appeal. Maybe they'll change their minds. I have a feeling they won't, but we'll follow that story closely. Another story, switching gears just a little bit. So a lot of times people talk about how for some reason, our children are criminalized. It's like automatically assumed that we've done something wrong. Down to, in a recent story, a 7-year-old girl in Florida, there was a witness that said that the teacher pulled her by her wrist from the school bus, falsely accusing her of stealing a phone, and bruised her arm. And so now her mom wants to file a lawsuit, now a federal lawsuit. She's 7 years old. She's getting on the bus. She's accused of doing something that she didn't, obviously do. But even if maybe the teacher thought something was going on, to have the audacity to put your hands on, to the point where she had bruising and markings and had to go to the hospital and have it wrapped and all of that. Just what are your thoughts? I mean, because you can't see the picture of this little girl. I'll let you look it up when you have some time. But she doesn't even look, she is an innocent looking baby. Her name is Amaria Clark. She has on glasses like us. She's the cutest little thing. I just, the audacity. Why do you think, again, this is a white teacher, this is a Black student. Why are, I won't say all, but some whites just so quick to assume that we're in the wrong? Where do you think that comes from?
Yeah, I mean, it comes from, it comes from 400 years of slavery in this country. Not slavery, but racism. It comes from the history of, racial bias and white people not seeing us as completely human and as individuals who have worth and who deserve dignity. That's where it stems from, if you ask me. As a mother, listen, the lady just better be glad that the mother did not walk up that school and do something more than file some charges. I would be horrified if something like that happened to one of my children. Mm-hmm. But it really does go back to in my mind, the institutional racism that is still very much alive in not just criminal justice, not just housing, but education as well, right? And I hope that this experience, if number one, it doesn't set in some long-term trauma for this little girl and her family. I hope they are able to work through that. But I also hope that it serves as a strong learning experience for not just that teacher, but all teachers, not just that school district, but all school districts, that, we're not going to just be sitting around here letting you, tug and pull at our kids. Mm-hmm. Whether she had taken something or not taken something, that response is completely unacceptable. And we're going to have to learn how to make sure that biases are checked at the door. And when they can't be checked at the door, you're going to be held accountable for the ways in which your biases damage and hurt and offend Black and brown children.
Right, because this is a traumatizing experience. And I read a little bit more about the story. This child actually suffers from a disability. And so they said that the teacher is just making up an excuse. This really her pulling her off the bus and all of that. It was more an act of retaliation because the girl had already complained to her mom that the teacher wasn't allowing her to use the bathroom and some other things. She had to frequently go to the bathroom. And so basically the teacher had already been, I think, reprimanded for the student complaining about her. So this was just a way almost to just, allegedly get back at the child. So that makes it even worse.
It makes it even worse. Good God. You're talking about an adult, a teacher trying to get back at a 7-year-old.
All against a 7-year-old child. So we will be following this story. Like I said, she plans to file a suit, federal suit. Like you said, I think it's just an example of one that, like you said, it's not just in the criminal justice reform and these other typical areas, even down into our educational school systems, but it's also just an example of how we just automatically assume, our kids are bad, our kids had to do something wrong. We don't get that grace. We don't get that that benefit of the doubt at all. Last story is a story out of actually Tennessee. There was a couple, Joyce Watkins and Charlie Dunn. They were finally exonerated last week after serving 27 years in prison for a crime they did commit. For those of you guys listening about this story, essentially, Joyce's granddaughter had been spending some time somewhere else. The grandmother had picked the daughter up. She was with her boyfriend at the time, Charlie Dunn. And that she had sustained, she wasn't feeling well. They took her to the hospital, and in the hospital, they evaluated her, and they saw that there was some vaginal trauma and some other things. And she later passed away from her injuries. And so they, of course, just assumed, well, they brought her in, she died. So, they must have had something to do with it. And so long story short, they spent 27 years. And right before Charlie was paroled, he did pass away. Obviously, Joyce was released a couple of years ago, but sometimes it takes a while for you to get the exoneration, even once you're released. And so they've been exonerated, and obviously they can sue right? You can always sue for millions of dollars for that time lost, but is there really even a dollar figure you can put on this at this point?
No, there's no dollar figure at all, you know. And every time I hear of a wrongful conviction story, I'm just, it just makes me so angry because yes, we can exonerate. Yes, some states might compensate. And that makes me, it makes me furious that many states do not. You can be wrongfully convicted. Many of your years can be just stolen from you. And you cannot even get an apology from some states. You can't get an apology. You can't sue for compensation, nothing.
Now, Julius, does his state allow for compensation? Let's say this goes all the way through because we're praying. Does his particular state compensate?
I don't believe Oklahoma does. I don't.
That's another example of a state perhaps that does not compensate if someone.
I don't believe so.
Well, we're going to look into that because I want to know.
I want to know too. I know that in some states it's like a case by case basis, and so I don't want to speak too soon, but I don't think so. And I do know people in Oklahoma who spent years and years in prison for crimes that they didn't commit. In Oklahoma, didn't even say so sorry. I just don't understand it. And so I'm just, there are not enough words for the people you're talking about and people like them who have spent time in prison for things that they did not do. There are no good enough words to describe like how we should feel as a society for these people.
Well, I tell people all the time, I can't even imagine spending, even if I did do something, I can't even imagine spending, a couple of months in a jail somewhere. But if I know I didn't do it, and I have to be there, it is just like an extra layer of pressure I feel like you carry, because it's like, I'm literally here. I could be out living my life, doing the things that I plan for my life.
Right.
But because this system, like you said, this broken system has not come to the conclusion that I came to, on day one, that I didn't do it. I got to wait for this broken system to catch up to the truth, essentially. We're just waiting. And like you said, sometimes it never catches up and you're just sitting there.
Tragic. It's so tragic. And then you say that the gentleman in this situation dies before he can get to parole.
His exoneration, his parole, all of that. So he died thinking that the world thought he was a rapist and a murderer. He died, even though I'm sure he knew he didn't do it, right? But he died knowing that, or at least thinking that is what the world thought of him.
Yeah, and I mean, along with that, obviously all across this country, we're dealing with issues of institutional racism in the criminal justice system, right? In every state. But you think about what these folks experienced must have been in the South, like Tennessee. That's where they were, right? In Tennessee.
Yeah.
We have a gentleman in Tennessee now, Purvis Payne, who lots of people will know, who was on death row for decades for a crime that he says that he didn't commit. And now, and they, Tennessee was set to, execute him. And, thank God recently, he has been found to have some intellectual disabilities, which finally the court said, okay, we can't execute Purvis, but Purvis has some very strong innocence claims. And you think about Anthony Ray Hinton down in Alabama, how he spent, almost 30 years on death row down there for a crime that he didn't commit. And all of these things really do, explicitly tie back to not just a racist history in the United States, but particularly a racist history in the South, in the Southern states, where, if you Black and you even, if you Black, you don't even have to look guilty. You know what I mean? Right. You don't have to be on the scene of the crime. If you Black, so many of these states historically have just been about seeing you go away, get out of
Yeah,
our
they're not
society, get out of
interested,
our
like
face.
you said, in any real truth and justice, even if,
No.
you even present them the facts, Yeah, I totally agree. And I just think I'm gonna make you trademark this phrase that you said a few minutes ago, but it's like, I like how you said justice adjacent. Like, we're never really going to maybe get complete justice just because of how the world is set up and all the terrible history that's come along with it, where you've had one group of people dominating all the other group of people. No matter where you go, for the most part, colonialism has the same theme, whether it was in Asia or Africa or America. It forever changed how we look at each other, how we view power, money, control. And so, like you said, as much as we try to create new rules and, put Black presidents in the White House, we're trying, but it's like, we're never going to completely get there, So it's like we have to kind of settle for this justice adjacent. I think that was a beautiful way of putting that. So with that being said, let's talk a little bit about you. We're talking about everybody else. So what I love about these interviews, and I actually have a friend. He actually I stole this from him, or he gave it to me. He's like, these are really Black superheroes that you are interviewing. So you're one of my Black superheroes. We're gonna take down the cape a little bit. Because a lot of times we see you guys out here and you're just doing all these amazing things for the Black community, the Black race. And sometimes I look at you guys and I'm tired for you.
You're tired for us, aren't you? I'm telling you right now, we tired.
I'm tired for you. I mean, and I don't want to get emotional, but I cried, for probably like 24 hours.
Yeah.
Right before Julius was possibly going to be executed.
Yeah.
Because I thought it was going to happen.
Yeah.
So, so to me, you guys are our superheroes, saving a life. I mean, you guys are bigger than doctors. I mean, you guys are literally saving people's lives. And it just burns me that, that we have to fight this hard for the truth and for the facts. I don't see any other race. Sometimes people say the Jews, and I don't see anybody else having to fight, this hard. But with that being said, before all of this, right? Before you became an advocate, before you even knew who Julius Jones were, you were CeCe Jones-Davis. Probably even weren't a reverend yet, right?
Right.
So take us back to before you became a reverend, before you became a criminal justice reform advocate. Yeah. Who were you before? Where were you raised? Where did you go to school? Just give our audience your path towards where you are now.
I'm happy to. I was raised in Halifax County, Virginia. And a lot of people, if you've heard of Halifax at all, you might have heard of it because Henrietta Lacks was from Halifax County.
Interesting.
Of course, Henrietta Lacks was the woman whose cells have been replicated and used over and over again to study different diseases, to cure different things. And for years and years, her contribution went unnoticed. But I'm from that town, and we are on the southern border of the state of Virginia, and so we have had a very long, arduous history of racism. We were once the largest slaveholding county in the state of Virginia. Not too far from Jamestown, where the first Africans came. Enslaved Africans came in 1619. And so, growing up there for me in the 80s was something like, I always felt like I was growing up in kind of in a time warp, that I always knew that, that environment, that culture had not progressed in some ways like so many other places had. But I had a very strong community. My mother really and my father really let the village help raise us. And I have one sibling. She's my twin sister.
Oh, you have
And
a twin. There's two of you.
I do have a
Now, you
twin.
know what? I bet a lot of people don't know that. I bet a
Yeah.
lot of people don't know that. So
Yeah.
you are a twin. That's so
Yeah,
interesting.
I'm a
Okay.
twin. And, you know, our parents really let the village help to raise us, you know, so that included our grandparents and aunts and uncles and church, you know, family. And so, you know, I can honestly say that I have just been well nurtured, really well loved, and people always had really high expectations of me and my sister. You know, my mother was the first in her family to go to college. And so, you know, college, of course, was really, really important. And so me and my sister decided to, you know, come out of the country, come out of that little town and go to Howard University in DC.
HU. I'm from DC. And I got
Okay.
into Howard undergrad and Howard Law School. And I regret not accepting either. But you know what? Somehow I'm still on their alumni roll call
Come
for
on.
financial.
Well,
So I always
HU. Well, at least you know exactly. You have a sense of like what that
Yes.
whole Howard experience is.
Yes.
And that experience just really gave me a very strong foundation. You know, it was a very pivotal, transformative time in my life where, you know, I understood Black excellence. I saw Black excellence on a daily basis, whether it was among the students, whether it was with the faculty. You know, the Mecca, it was the Mecca. It is the Mecca. And that experience gave me so much pride for being Black. You know, Howard was, you know, the first place where, you know, I decided to cut off all my hair and go natural, you know, which is a really big thing for a Black girl, particularly in the South. You know, we are oftentimes very much judged by our hair texture, how long it can grow, the length, you know, and all of that. And so, you know, the Howard experience was a very liberating experience for me. You know, I pledged Alpha Kappa Alpha there, and you know, that learning and experience that kind of bond in Black sisterhood, and really growing such an appreciation for the excellence and the magic that other Black women possess. You know, all of that was really, really important. And then after that, I went off to Yale Divinity School. Was one Black person, like out of a handful that was in the divinity school at that time. Got involved as a Yale Black seminarian to really help to deal with the issues kind of on campus of diversity. But that whole seminary experience for me was also really pivotal and important because, you know, I'd always been a person of faith. I grew up in the church, but I did always have a sense of calling in terms of ministry, but I didn't know what that looked like. The only models I had were, you know, older Black men in the pulpit, and that was not appealing for me at all, but I still had a sense of call. So what seminary did for me was really help me understand that ministry, it really it means, you know, what will be my witness of Christ in the world. And, you know, I came out of that experience knowing that I wanted to work mostly, I do work in churches, but mostly, you know, outside of the four walls of the church. And my work ever since has been at the intersections of faith and social justice. So whether it was HIV/AIDS in the Black community, women and girls issues, I've been a menstrual advocate for a number of years. And now, you know, Julius's story has brought me into criminal justice reform. And all of that really has been by accident. I had no intention of ever, you know, being in criminal justice. I didn't study criminal justice. I don't have a law degree, you know, all these kinds of things. But you know, if you say, in my experience, if you say yes to God, if you say yes to God, you won't know where your life will actually end up. Like that yes is an open-ended yes, and you just go with it,
Just
and you
go with
end up,
it.
yeah, you just
Well,
go with
I think it's beautiful that you say it that way, because I mean, I think that's the answer to my next question in terms of what experiences kind of led you to become an advocate. You didn't say, well, I'm going to come and become an advocate. I'm just going to take the call. I'm in seminary school. I'm having these experiences. I know I don't necessarily want to be necessarily always within four walls of a church. I'm going to just find things that I'm passionate about, and I'm going to show up. And this is how I show up in my faith. This is how I'm a representative of my Lord and Savior in these various callings, these various, you know, again, I think you're really hitting on my superhero theme. You're like, you know, you took the call and you just went with it. With that being said, what would you say has been your best experience as an advocate so far? And then what has been your worst experience?
Whew. You know, I think the best experience as an advocate has been seeing the numbers of people who will come alongside you if you stick to it. You know, Julius, it was very fortunate because, you know, Viola Davis and the Innocence Project teamed up with ABC, and this docuseries came out about him called The Last Defense. And I happened to see that, and people all over the country happened to see that. And what I decided to do was to take The Last Defense as if it were an ember in my hand. And my job as an advocate was to blow on that ember and blow on that ember until it became something substantial, you know, a fire. And to see the amounts of people who then came along to add their expertise, their knowledge, their wisdom, their energy to that fire. And then, you know, my work was to, once it was really a fire, my work was just to try to make sure that the fire stayed halfway contained, you know, and going in the direction it needed to go. But the greatest part of this has been how many advocates have been born out of this experience, and how many, you know, just the power of people, like advocating to a point where, you know, something gets loud enough where it gets people's attention, and to see the best of people come together has really been powerful. Now, what is the worst experience? It is really a challenge to advocate for people who the world has already written off, to advocate for a black man on death row, man, trying to humanize that person, particularly to the majority culture, but even to other Black people, to be honest with you. You know, that I think that was the hardest. That has been the hardest thing as an advocate, to try to convince people that someone else's life matters, why that person's life matters, why his family matters.
And why it's an injustice in the first place that the facts are just being set aside. It would be different if, oh, there are not a lot of facts here to even really support the person that's innocent. But it's so overwhelming at this point that it's like almost like a no-brainer. You've got parole boards not once but twice agreeing, you know, it's not adding up. I think this person should go ahead and be released. I mean, so it's not just you and your advocates and his family and him saying it. Now, you know, many years later, you have actual boards of people voting in the system to say, yeah, we don't think they got it right here. This person should be released.
It just goes to show you how crushing our system intends to be. You know, I've said it many times when I speak specifically about death row, because that's what I know. You know, when somebody is on death row and they have an execution date, it's like a freight train. It is very difficult, no matter what. It is very difficult to stop that train. And, you know, we came within that. That's evident in what you're saying about the fact that the Oklahoma Pardon and Parole Board voted twice that Julius 3-1, that Julius's sentence should be commuted to life with the possibility of parole because of the very serious questions in his case. But the governor and the AG and the DA just kept right on going, and the fact that we got, 3-4 hours within, his
the time that, right, he had his last meal and everything. And
100%. His family had their last visit the day before. They had their last phone call the night before. And so for all of this to happen and let this man get 3 or 4 hours, right before his execution was scheduled, it was the most cruel thing I have ever seen in my whole life. And I hope I never see anything else like it again. But it is why we need more advocates. It is why we need people to continue to see people's stories and understand the power of discernment. When you see well and you can hear well, then that means that you need to take the next step. And all of us won't know what the next step should be. God knows I did not, again, I didn't know anything about criminal justice, but here's what I knew. I knew that the state I lived in at the time was at risk of executing an innocent man. And I knew that whoever this man was, that he had value in the eyes of God. And so there was no way I could see his story and turn away.
And just keep going and turn away. Well, that leads to my next question, actually. What is your general advice for someone that's interested in becoming a justice reform advocate? Like you said, even if they don't have a legal background, because as you can see, you didn't have a legal background, and some of your other campaigns were in other things like HIV and AIDS and other things. So what would you say is some advice for someone that wants to get started?
Yeah, listen, everybody's path is not going to be the same in terms of advocacy. But know this, that we make the way by walking. There's no way that you can know on the front end everything that you need to know. But the time is too crucial for us to wait until we're educated about every single thing before we do something, right? Mm-hmm. So I didn't know anything, for example, about death penalty. I didn't know anything, but I knew that there was a man on death row in Oklahoma who should not be there. And so I started to meet with influencers in Oklahoma. I started to ask questions. I started a letter writing campaign. And as we went, I learned so much. I mean, obviously you need some basic information before you start out, but don't wait to, 4 or 5 years until you get said degree, until, before you start lean in the ways, incrementally, in the ways that you can, because time is of the essence. People's lives are getting chewed up and they need us, they need us now. And so do what you can now and commit to educating and get educated, commit yourself to being educated along the way. And as you go and as you grow and learn, you might figure that you need to pivot this way. Oh, I wasn't doing that right, so I pivot that way. You got to be willing to be flexible as advocates. You've got to be willing to pivot. And I think if I've learned anything, that's one of the things I've learned out of this experience.
Well, thank you for sharing that with our audience. I always remind our audience and just anybody I'm talking to that less than 5% of the legal profession is Black, and it's been over 50 years, since we've had, the first Black, attorney, and I believe she went to Howard, if I'm not mistaken. So I just think, I think about that number, less than 5%, and I'm like, the number isn't moving. It's not moving. It's still, no matter what year you look it up, it's less than 5%. And so a lot of times people say, oh, I don't like the laws. I don't like this happening. Well, if we don't have advocates like you, if we don't have lawyers, we don't have judges, we don't have, district attorneys and mayors and congressmen and senators, in any of those roles, if they don't look like us, what do you expect? They're not creating rules to support somebody else or benefit someone else. Maybe not doing it against us, but they don't have us in mind because they're not us. And so I like what you said, that you just have to, if we're going to grow with more Black advocates, if we're going to grow with more Black attorneys, Black politicians, Black legislators, you know, Black governors. Imagine if there was a Black governor right now, you know, instead of Governor State, how differently this probably would have looked. I mean, just doing those things. And so, like you said, I think, again, we can't all be lawyers and governors and DAs and senators and congressmen. I get that. We can't all be, but there could be one of those things that interests you.
It can
be an option. You just kind of have to pivot and see, you know, where it lands you. But even before, like you said, you run for these offices or you finish the schooling for some of these positions that require certain schooling, you can open up your laptop, open up your phone, really, because everything is social media, and you can start whole campaigns online. So I would say to those that are seeking right now to get into this field, whether it be a lawyer, you know, law student, advocate, someone in politics, like you said, the journey of 1,000-mile steps with the first step.
That's right.
First step.
Exactly.
And I'm actually going to grab my charger and we can continue.
Okay.
With that being said, journey of 1,000 miles, you know, starts with the first step. A lot of people obviously know you're one of the faces. I think, you know, Kim Kardashian even, you know, advocate, you know, there's so many people that advocated, but your face stood out to me in terms of the person that was really advocating for so long for Julius. Can you tell our audience, how did you even meet Julius? His family, his story, like, how did you become so much a part of, you know, managing this campaign for him?
Yeah, you know, my family had moved from Virginia to Oklahoma. My husband had a job there. And I had lived there for 3 years. You know, before I moved to Oklahoma, I had worked for the White House for a number of years. And if anybody out there has worked in political environments, you know, you need a good break. And so I moved to Oklahoma with my family and really, you know, was gonna just be a stay-at-home mom. And I did that for about 3 years. And I was happy doing that. And then I stumbled upon The Last Offense, which I noted earlier was produced by Viola Davis and the Innocence Project for ABC. And, you know, it was just one of those things that I couldn't rest.
Shake it. Mm-hmm.
I couldn't shake it. I couldn't. And I tried to go to sleep that night and I couldn't sleep. And the next day I Googled Julius Jones attorneys and I found a number and called. And Amanda Bass, who, if anybody watched the clemency or commutation hearings themselves, she kicked butt. She is just so amazing. But Amanda answered the phone and I said, listen, I live in Oklahoma. I saw this story last night and I'm so bothered by this. You know, what can I do? And, you know, she said, I was such a nice lady, write a letter to the governor. But I just knew after hanging up that there was something else that I could do. So I went to social media and said, hey, people in Oklahoma, have y'all heard about Julius Jones? And, you know, can we meet at this church on Saturday to talk about
and
this?
What year was this?
This was August 2018.
Okay, so it's been almost 4 years. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so at that meeting, so I held the first community meeting in August. After seeing the docuseries, 30 people showed up, and that included his family, his mother, his sister, his father, his brother. And after that, you know, I just knew, after connecting with his family, I just heard the voice that I recognize as God's saying, keep going, keep going. And that voice said to me, don't you let these people, you know, God oftentimes talks to me like my grandmother would talk to me. Like a, you know, an older Black woman would talk to me. He said, don't you let these people be in Oklahoma by themselves. Don't you leave these people in this mess by themselves.
Yeah, for sure.
And so after that, I stayed very much. I had not talked to Julius Jones. I had not met, and to this day, I've never met Julius Jones. But and this is how I describe it to people. This is how I know it's a calling. I would wake up every day and an engine, it felt like an engine would turn on the inside of me. And I would sit on the edge of my bed and recall that there's a man named Julius Jones sitting on death row who could lose his life behind something that he did not do. And that thing would motivate me. And I would drop my kids off at school and I would be raising sand all day long, every day. And so it was about like power mapping. I wasn't from Oklahoma, so I didn't know a lot of people. So who are the powerful people?
Let me go to these people, right? Let me go to these influencers.
And from there, they would give me 2 or 3 names, and I would go and they would give me 2 or 3 names. And then, I was holding community meetings and screenings of The Last Offense because I wanted people to know Julius's story. And so it just started to snowball. And then January, I want to say it was 2020, the movie Just Mercy came out. And I said, people need to watch Just Mercy because there's a lot of things,
similar things.
In Julius's story. And so I raised some money. I hosted some private screenings of the movie Just Mercy, and ultimately got connected with the producer of Just Mercy. His name is Scott Butnick. And Scott is like this phenomenal man, an advocate who works in criminal justice reform. And when I say after he, listened to me, heard Julia's story, he did not leave me. He did not leave Julius. And, he gave us a lot of access, which included Represent Justice, an organization that came alongside the movie Just Mercy to bring awareness about criminal justice reform. And so Represent Justice took us up as a micro campaign with the help of Robert Rooks and Shakira Diaz and Gretel Trong and Daniel Forkio and so many other people, Gordon.
Right.
And they took us up and really made us a campaign, because I knew we had to be a campaign.
Yeah. If you were going to keep that fire going, as you said at the top of the interview.
If we were going to grow and really sophisticate, we needed a campaign and the infrastructure to match. And so Represent Justice funded us. We were able to hire some professionals who could do the grit work every day. And that gave us wings. And that's how we got to where we are. The same month that Represent Justice decided to come alongside me was the same month that the pandemic broke out. And so the amount of advocacy we have been able to do in the middle of a global pandemic.
Like you said, people worried about, a virus that we can't control or understand. And then you throw in the middle of that things that happened with George Floyd, and then, and all the other things that were happening. And then your campaign, and people just saying, enough is enough. But, I think at some level, I would never wish another pandemic on us, but I will say at some level, it has, I think, humanized us a little bit more, whether you be Black, white, Asian. I think we realize no matter what race you are, you can get this virus. Like, it kind of brought people more together, realizing life, is not promised tomorrow. So in a way, I think it's helped campaigns like yours, even though it was a crazy time for it to, like you said, take off during that time.
People were still enough to listen.
Yes.
People were still enough to watch the docuseries that we have been begging folk to watch forever. People had the time to do it, and so, that stillness, the ways in which we were, the world had to kind of come to a bone rattling halt in some ways, I think were really helpful in helping not just justice for Julius, but like you mentioned, all kinds of issues and causes to really kind of come to the consciousness of a broader audience. And I also have to say that, once we got to a certain place, we had so many people in Oklahoma, leaders in Oklahoma, who came to bring their resources. You know,
you even had celebrities. I mean, celebrities, as soon as they heard your stories,
100%. And God, thank God for them. But the grit work of this campaign and this effort, this movement has really been fueled by the blood, sweat, and tears of leaders in Oklahoma. And I'm just so, I'm just so grateful for them, because without them, I don't know where we would be, but I don't know that Julius would be alive. And it really was a demonstration of how everyday, ordinary, normal, however you want to classify these folks, come together and team up with people who have bigger influence, right? And bigger names and more resources. Like, it really does point to the reality for me that it takes all of us. Justice requires everybody.
As they say, it takes a village to raise a child. It's going to take a village to get through this. With that said, can you give us some updates, some next action steps as it relates to Julius? Is there any event, anything you want to plug over the next couple of months? What is next for the Julius Jones campaign, and how can people help?
Yeah, 100%. We're in a place right now where we're trying to figure out what's next, to be honest. The governor put forth an executive order on November the 18th that said that he was commuting Julius's sentence under the, what do you call it? I forget the word, but basically he's commuting Julius's sentence with the understanding that Julius will never have an opportunity to be before another pardon and parole board in his life. Mm-hmm. And listen, and I want to say something, remind me about that, okay? Because I want to say something about that in a second. But his attorneys are now, working through the legalities of that executive order. Julius, by statute in Oklahoma, if your commutation is denied, mm-hmm. then you have to wait 3 years for to apply for a new commutation.
Apply for a new one, but he made it so essentially he couldn't even apply for another one.
Correct, but his attorneys are looking into the constitutionality of that, and advocacy, and this is something I think is really important for people to know. Advocacy and legal work best hand in hand, and so I never go out of step with what the legal team is doing, thinking, recommending. I never do, because we have to be on the same team, and we have to be all together in terms of strategy. We really, really do. So I want to say that to anybody that's thinking about becoming an advocate, and for a legal situation, like, you got to be in step. You and the lawyers have to be in step. Mm-hmm. And so we are just trying to figure out what's next. But Julius,
I want to circle back, like I said, because you told me to remind you.
Okay.
Why did he create an executive order?
Let me tell you why. Mm-hmm. He created that executive order, I believe, because he felt so much international pressure to not kill Julius Jones. However, the victim's family got an opportunity to sit with the governor, something that he would not do with the Jones family. Mother Jones showed up to that governor's office. He turned her away. But he did sit with the victim's family, which would have at least been the victim's sister and daughters. And let me say this: those people had been through hell. The crime that was committed was a real crime. Okay, this thing really did happen. A man lost his life, right? Two girls lost their dad forever. I can't even imagine the trauma. So, let me say that. Mm-hmm. However, there is also something about white tears that continues to put Black people's lives in harm's way. Oklahoma just celebrated or commemorated in 2021, June 2021, the 100 years of the Tulsa race massacre, right? How did that massacre come about? Came about because a white woman said that a Black man did X, Y, Z, right?
Emmett Till all over again.
And here we are, 100 years from there, and we have white women essentially who get with the governor to say that they are afraid, and that could be legit for them, that they are afraid of Julius Jones. They are afraid of what he would do to them if he got out, right? And so there's the phenomenon at work once again. And what do white men do? What do white men do?
They protect. They come in and they protect white women, and
right.
they're
white women
make
start
sure
to
that
cry,
they're secure and they feel safe.
When white women start to cry about the threat of a Black man, that does something, I believe, that does something psychologically within white men, where they feel they've got to protect at all costs. I think that is what in part has happened here, that he has felt that he has had to protect those white women, and by doing that, keep an innocent Black man in prison for the rest of his life. And that's a sociological reality that we have seen in history so many times. And as soon as I knew that they had met with the governor,
you knew that was, you knew.
Oh Lord, that's not
a good thing. Yeah. And I'll be honest, I'm glad you're sharing this with our audience, because I don't think a lot of people know this. I think people thought, okay, the parole board had recommended that, his sentence obviously be commuted at a minimum, but he also be released. But even on the governor's side, that there should always be an opportunity to present new facts or existing facts that support that someone is innocent and they should be released. For you to create a whole order around this to say, okay, well, I'm not going to kill you.
Right.
But you can never ask me again or anybody in this office again.
Right.
For, because Governor Senate, he's not going to be there forever. There'll be a new governor. Right. So, no, you can't ask anybody in this office. I'm going to put in this order. There's something about that. And like you said, I'm not a constitutional law expert, but there are some laws that say that when you create something and it really is really just directed kind of at one person or one group of people, that it's unconstitutional. You can't create laws that are just to attack or to take the rights away from one group of people or one person. You can't create laws that way. And it just sounds like that's what this is. And perhaps, like you said, working with the legal team, they can find some precedent. Maybe they can take this to the Supreme Court and say, listen, this governor, he commuted the sentence, but he created it so that this person can never go back and get any.
Exactly. So Jay, what I'm really prayerful and hopeful that, the attorneys will find ways around, me and all of Julius's advocates and supporters, we still have a whole lot of hope. Listen, faith has brought us safe this far. If I promise you that, it is a miracle that we got this far. In my mind, it is a miracle that Julius Jones is alive. And so if he's yet alive, I maintain that there is so much hope. And we are not going to give up on that hope. And it's been really, really important. You asked about, what are we going to do now? While we kind of waiting on legal strategy, we are going to build a nonprofit that Julius is founding that focuses on youth, that focuses on, mentorship, focuses on civic engagement, focuses on criminal justice reform in Oklahoma. And then we hope to, to spread it out outside of Oklahoma. But with that man's life and all that he has been through, it has value. It means something. And while we're in the meantime, we are going to be doing what we can on his behalf and by his inspiration to affect change in Oklahoma when it comes to the death penalty, juvenile incarceration, so many of the issues that have really been highlighted in Julius's case. We want to get behind candidates who are forward thinking, who are not so stuck and not so scared and not so racist. We want to get behind good candidates for public office. And so we've got stuff that we're going to be doing. And I really invite people to follow Justice for Julius on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. to kind of know, what
what's
is
kind of
happening.
next and
Yep.
where they
Know
can,
what's next.
help.
And folks can, for the work that I do, people can follow me at CeCe Jones-Davis on social media.
Okay, well, I appreciate you, just plugging those pages because, like you said, I always laugh and say we kind of live in our phones in terms of that. But, one thing about the upside of us living in our phones is that anyone can access information at any time. Right. With the click of a button, you can donate money, you can write a letter. You were even just doing screenings of the documentary. That even just gives me, because I think I've watched like bits, like clips of it, but I've never sat and watched it from beginning to end. So
you can do that, Jay. You can do that, and other people can do that at justiceforjulius.com.
Okay, so you can sign up for a way to do a screening. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
All three parts are on the website. So justiceforjulius.com. And anybody can go and watch it. I encourage you to watch it.
Yes, I want to watch that whole screening because I know that's what inspired you to get started in the first place. And interesting enough, what inspired me to start the Black Lawyers Podcast and some other things I've done in the last 2 years was the Netflix Ava DuVernay's When They See Us.
Yeah.
I was so disturbed by that, kind of like you. I watched that and I could not go to sleep. And I'm like, I had heard of the story, and not that I didn't think it was disturbing before, but I don't think I knew the depth of the injustice until I watched the 5-part series on Netflix. And I said, I know I said I didn't really want to do anything with criminal law. I didn't want to, it was too much. I didn't think I could handle it. I'm an emotional person, so I just felt like I could never participate in anything like criminal law or in criminal procedure or things like that. But then when I saw it, I said, I have a whole law degree. It's okay to, represent, my IP clients and my entertainment clients. I can continue to do that, but there is no reason why I can't figure out a way to, even if I'm not going to be a criminal lawyer, to not get involved.
Yeah.
And so this podcast and some other things I've been working on over the last 2 years, even just creating a directory for free lawyers for protesters. I did that, I was like, I'm going to use my resources and just, like you said, just take a step and do it. And Ava DuVernay probably doesn't know, but she, she's listening. Yes. She's the reason I watched it and just, like you said, could not sleep at night. So I'm there with you. Mm-hmm.
Doesn't that really, that's a beautiful example. Like, it really does take all of us. Like, it takes a producer to bring a story to our attention. It takes a lawyer to have the kind of tenacity that you did, right? Like, it literally, like, we're all connected in this. And law might not be everybody's thing.
Right. Everybody may not be able to be a lawyer, but you can do other things to still bring these stories forward.
Right. And so law might not be everything, for everybody, but justice is for
everybody.
Justice is all of our responsibility. When I think about justice, the simplest definition for me is making things right. It is all of our responsibility to make things right in this world. And so your illustration really did just confirm, and affirm that, man, it takes all of us to do the work of justice in this world.
And I will say this, because I'm going to speak this into existence. Once Julius, I know they've already done this kind of documentary with this case. No, there needs to be a movie.
Amen.
Kind of like a Just Mercy based on Julius Jones. And I think anybody would jump at the opportunity to do it, because it's just an amazing story of endurance for him behind the cell. He's kind of watching us, out here doing it for him. But it's just an amazing story. And like you said, just like Central Park 5, just like you seeing his documentary, you never know how someone can watch something and that can spark a change. So I'm putting it out into the universe that once he is free, that, his full story from beginning to end can be told, and he can be out like a free man. Someone could put a face on the person that's finally out and finally endured and finally succeeded, not like you said, on just his own efforts, but because everyone came together. So with that being said, I always end my episodes with the Black Excellence Moment of the Week. This week we have April Ryan from the Griot. She made history, longest serving Black female White House correspondent. So you talk about how we have to get the information out.
Yes.
And a lot of times we don't even have, you know, Black correspondents or people even telling the stories in the first place for us to even know what's going on. So, you know, we salute April for that achievement. It'll be 25 years that she's been a Black female White House correspondent. And so, you know, I just encourage anyone that's listening. I think it's just a good example. We can't all do these roles. We can't all be correspondents or lawyers or judges or whatever, politicians.
Right.
But as Reverend CeCe just said so beautifully, justice is for everyone. Justice is for everyone. So just get in where you fit in. Get in where you fit in. And we just want to thank you for listening to this very special episode. This podcast is being released during Black History Month. So we're super excited that we can kick off Black History Month with this episode. Get involved, you know, ask questions, pivot, learn as you go. And as usual, you know, we here at the Black Lawyers Podcast, we're rooting for everyone Black. Thank you, everyone.